Now, some of this discussion is going to be in hindsight of the election Tuesday, but let's have a talk about DEI, one of the big battleground states, Michigan, the what they call the oven mitt state. That one had about $250 million worth of DEI investments since 2016, and it just caused more problems than it helped. And joining us on 710 KURV to talk about this, Neetu Arnold, a Paulson policy analyst at the Manhattan Institute and a contributor at Young Voices, who's got an article out in an opinion piece in USA Today talking about this entire thing. So where do we start with this? Let's go back to 2016. What did they end up doing at the University of Michigan?
Hi, well, thanks for having me. And the University of Michigan, like many universities across the country, we're investing millions of dollars in DEI programming. And the whole idea, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The idea was that, our society wasn't as equal as it was supposed to be, because when you look at the outcomes of various groups, especially by race, we're not seeing equal outcomes, whether that's in employment and housing. And so the way to achieve that was to, have various programming that centers, equity-based goals, hiring people based on certain races to equalize the outcomes. Having bias response teams, because universities and other businesses were just, there's racism everywhere. That's what the narrative was. And so the only way to fix it was by making sure we, I would say, looked inside and looked at our biases and trying to overcome that. But I think what many places like the University of Michigan found out was that it actually caused more division, because people were so afraid to talk to each other. Instead of like the bias response teams, they really became an opportunity to monitor speech, especially views that the people who are running these centers did not like. And I think it just caused an environment of fear, and people stopped talking to each other. And, when we look at the election outcomes, I think I've been hearing from so many people who didn't vote for Trump, who were just blindsided by the results. And I think a big part of that is just because people stopped talking to each other. And in some cases, I know people where they're not being upfront about their political views around their friends because they're afraid it will offend them. And so I can totally see why people who didn't vote for Trump, they are left in the dark.
Joining us on 710 KURV is Neetu Arnold, a Paulson policy analyst at the Manhattan Institute, joining us now. We're talking about DEI. And yeah, I know a lot of this is in the rearview mirror. A lot of this stuff has been avidly rejected by the American people, or at least that's one interpretation of what happened. Do you have any examples of what happened at the University of Michigan after they implemented these bias? I missed the term. Where did it go? These bias response teams. That's what they were. Were there any circumstances that stuck out as a large problem here, in specifically?
Yeah, well, I think when you go through the report, there was a report released by Faculty Senate where they're talking about, whether institutional neutrality should be adopted by the university, which is institutional neutrality is where the university abstains from making any political statements. Many of the responses from faculty, they just felt like there was an Orwellian environment. They couldn't talk freely about certain issues without offending. And there were pages of this in that report. And I think that's what's emblematic of the DEI programs. They didn't really, again, I think there was more emphasis on your group identity rather than diversity of thought and hearing different viewpoints.
Were there any segregational elements implemented? I know some schools had done something like that, little safe spaces and things like that.
I can't comment on that for the University of Michigan specifically. I need to look into that more. But I am well aware that many universities across the country have had these sort of segregated spaces, or they have affinity groups where, people are segregated based on race, or you'll hear about these segregated graduations, whether it's based on your race or sexual orientation. And that's pretty common at most college campuses.
Davis Rankin, your question?
A lot of questions, but we would be wrong to believe that President Trump's win, the DEI folks are not going away, correct? They think they've got the answer, and by God, they're going to stick around. They view America as racist to the core. And if I'm wrong, tell me. What this systemic racism, institutional racism, we're all racist, and we don't even know we're racist. And equity is not like a fair playing field. It's to put people where they would have been had there not been a history of racism for centuries.
Well, look, I think you're right that there's going to be a faction that will keep pushing for DEI. They're going to keep pushing for us to talk about race. And there's some people out there that even think that this election was really about identity. Now, that's not something I believe, and I think it's very clear that a lot of people are tired of being divided by their race, by having people assuming you are bad just based on how you look. And I think there's a reason that you'll have people that are pushing for DEI. I mean, there's an industry around it. I mean, you can make 5 figures just lecturing and teaching people about DEI practices.
Wow.
So, one positive thing that I see right now is just a lot of people are sick and tired of it. And a lot of people assume, well, it's just white people that oppose it. I don't think so. I think when you look at the election results, you see a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Asians that actually moved more to the right. And I don't think we can exclude the fact that a lot of the wokeness, a lot of the discussion of DEI, I mean, I think that's part of why people moved over. They were just tired of being lectured to and being told to view everything from this racialist perspective. I think people are just looking for unity, and they want to get back to, I think they're looking for good governance at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of, I guess everybody has a different definition of what racism is. Like for some people, if you even mention race at all, that's racist. For some people, if you don't mention race at all, it's racist. For some people, you can't possibly ever be racist to a white person. There's so many interesting rules about what people feel is racist and what isn't racist. And it's so difficult to please anybody these days, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that. I mean, I've been under the impression that racism is simply you are discriminating based on someone's race. I think what it's really turned into is just if you disagree with me on a topic, then you're racist. If you don't want to fix the outcomes based on race, you are racist, even though you might say that we can't really expect equal outcomes because there's so many factors that can affect your direction in life. It can be your choices. It can be your circumstances. Sometimes people I think we have to be okay with the fact that some people are going to have better cards than others. But at the end of the day, if we focus on opportunities, then I think we're giving everybody a shot to success. I mean, I think that's what America should be all about. But we can't expect equal outcomes because that also means that you probably have to take away opportunities from someone else, and that's where the problems begin.
Do you think that we're going to, with this election, move away from more of these DEI initiatives for the time being?
No.
No. I think we're going to try to. That's what I would say. I think we're going to try to move away from them. I think there's a lot of the public that really doesn't like these programs. But again, I think there's going to be a certain faction, whether they're in state, local, or I would say the state and local governments, who will try to push it through more quieter means, whether it's by, it's by funding, funding certain programs based on race or using proxies for race. But again, I think that so many people are fed up with DEI that everybody's keeping a closer eye, and there's just going to be a lot more of a fight.
Yeah, the term that I've heard a lot online is it sounds like HR is in the room with you when you start talking to people about this stuff. But hey, where can we find more information about you and your works, Neetu?
Yes, well, you can follow the Manhattan Institute online. You can just search for us. And you can also follow me on X at NEETU_Arnold.
Thanks a lot for spending some time with us this afternoon. Neetu Arnold, a policy analyst at the Manhattan Institute and Young Voices contributor, joining us on News Talk 710 KURV.